Alright. So what we're making is a slab mug. So you guys have already rolled one slab out. You guys rolled slab for the bottom of your foil pots. So just as a reminder, the canvases can be really convenient. You just lay out your canvas like so. And they are in this cupboard right here. Please put them back on the top shelf, not the bottom. Please don't just throw it in there, fold it up, put it back in there. These are for convenience. We don't really need them. Some of you will just roll it out fine on the table, but if you lollygag and take your sweet time, it will stick to the table if the moisture kind of sits there long enough. So you'll get this rolled out to 2 paint sticks, or a paint stick on each side thick, which is 1/4 inch. Mine's already rolled out. Save some time. Put the canvas back. I'm going to set it right up here. I'm going to use that next. So I've got my slab already rolled out. First thing I want to do, and make sure it's nice and even too. I get a lot of mugs each year that have little bumps and things in them. But the first thing I want to do is cut a nice straight line. So please don't use the rulers for that. I know the rulers, some of them are pretty straight, but they were donated from an elementary school. It looks like little kids have like chewed on them. So some of them have like little bumps and things in them. So I'm going to use the paint stick because they're nice and straight. Keep in mind there is this little divot cut or sanded out, so I wouldn't use that. I'm going to go ahead and cut an extra piece wider than my cylinder. This is going to be the bottom of my mug. Okay, so I'm going to set that aside. If you roll out your slab and you forget to cut that piece or you don't have enough clay for that piece, you can just roll out another slab later. But I'm going to cut a nice straight line. This one doesn't have to have any real rhyme or reason to it as long as it's straight. So I'm going to cut. And when I cut with the needle tool, I'll kind of give you a quick example. When I cut, if it's straight up and down, it gets all those little crusties. But if I just tilt it, all of a sudden it cuts nice and clean. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and cut my straight line. Then I'm going to measure, because you have to kind of picture this, but this is going to be the height of my mug here. So I want to make sure that I get the height the same all the way across. The minimum for grading wise has to be 4.5 inches tall. So I'm going to cut mine about 5 inches for this one. Yeah, let's do 5.5. I'm going to mark it at 5.5. And mark it down here at 5.5. Okay, then I'm going to line up the paint stick on those measurements. Do it as precise as I can. Okay, and make sure you hold the stick. Every year I see somebody go to cut it and the stick moves and they're like, oh, it's going to be okay. I don't know. You'll never know. Alright, so this is all excess. I could use this for my handle. The pulled handle I'll show you guys later, once you guys, about 2 or 3 days in, once people start getting the cylinder itself made. So that's all I'm going to show you this morning, is the cylinder. And the slab itself, if it's not 12 inches in length, it's not going to make it around there. If you want to find out how, I didn't just sit there and measure around, but I do measure the radius and then pi r squared and find out what the diameter completely is, and that way you don't roll out a whole slab and end up with too little of clay. Probably the most important part of this whole project is paper towel. Okay, so I'm going to get a piece of paper towel. You may be thinking, why is that the most important part? Because that's how you're going to get your cylinder out from the inside of your clay. So I'm going to wrap this, and I put one edge like right up to the edge of my cylinder. These cylinders are here. Okay. This one's kind of crooked, so I'm going to use the other side. So I'm wrapping that. You don't need this much paper towel, it's actually too much. It's going to kind of get in my way. But I'm going to do it right up to the edge on that one. Then the other side, I'm going to tuck it in. And this is going to be the top one like that. I'll show you why in just a minute. So now I'm going to wrap the clay around, keeping it pretty tight. overlaps quite a bit. So I have too much clay. I always like to make sure I have too much for a demo so I don't have to run off in the middle of the demo. But I'm going to cut right over my seam, and that one was kind of rounded as you guys saw, so I want to make sure I cut over that little portion there. So I'm just going to cut, and it doesn't need to be a straight line. It's just fairly straight. Okay? I'll cut there, take that chunk, scraps, put that in the recycle, and then take the little piece off the inside. Every year I see somebody who makes their slab mug, they forget to take the inside chunk out, and they blend it in, and it's a lot of work to blend all that. Okay, so I'm going to overlap it one more time because that was a lot of overlap. So it'll fit a little bit more flush. And again, I'm going to cut on that overlap. Take that out. That's the outside one, and then there's going to be an extra little chunk on the inside. So now I'm going to score and slip the seam together. With the cylinder, no matter how far you get 1 day with the cylinder. Not like a full day, like 24 hours, but you get a day with it, and you got to put it back. How long do you get with it? The day. And I'll explain why here in a second once I get this scored and slipped together. It's most convenient if you can get the cylinder done in 1 day. But sometimes that's just not going to happen. It takes you a while to roll out the slab, or you roll out a slab and it's not big enough. You're going to go through various things, little run-ins. Okay. Now I'm going to compress the seam together. So right there, I'm just pressing the seam with my thumbs. This is the part where most of my students' projects come apart. So right there, compress. Just want to add pressure to it. Then I'm going to take my finger and just lightly blend. Okay. You could use the smooth rib to smooth this out. Part of your grade on this too is blending the seam inside and out. So I shouldn't be able to see that seam at all by the time you're done. I shouldn't even know where the seam is. Okay, so now is where I'm going to explain about the cylinder. So if you have a cylinder in there, you leave this on and you put it in your locker, because it happens every year. 1 or 2 of you will do it. One, that clay will shrink and it's going to get really, really tight. Most of the time they break, and it breaks right where your seam is, and you got to do it all over again. Okay, so you need to get the cylinder out. I'm going to put the floor on before I take the cylinder out. So I'll show you that in just a second. But you can imagine the clay shrinks, right? While it's sitting in your locker, especially if it's not bagged, it'll shrink, and that cylinder inside is not going to shrink. So it's going to hold right where it's at, and when the clay shrinks, it just goes, and it breaks your seam. So make sure you take the seam out. Even if it's just to this point that you got to, take it out, and the next day you'll be able to do this, and I'll show you how we make the bottom. It's a little easier with the cylinder. So I'm going to make the bottom. I'm just going to trace around the outside of my cylinder. Make sure it's with the clay. Every year I get a few of you who, and it's a brilliant idea, it just fits kind of funny, but they use the cylinder and they trace the cylinder to make the bottom. It's got to be with the clay on, so it covers the entire bottom, and that way you get clay to clay contact instead of just this little circle that fits inside, and I'll show you what I mean. So at this point I'm going to trace around my cylinder. Also notice that I don't tilt my needle tool underneath. I want it to be nice and flat, so I kind of like level it to my cylinder here. And it doesn't need to be perfect because you're going to blend a lot of this. It's actually almost more convenient or more feasible or plausible to, oops, I almost cut my cylinder, to leave a little extra clay. That way you get more clay to blend and it gets a little stronger. So usually I don't have this gap over here. But if you needed to get, if you have the clay all the way around, you just cut like this and it's easier to pull apart. But. So now I'm going to score and slip this together. Notice when I pull this off that the circle's not perfect. Okay? It's a little chunky. Maybe I have too high of expectations. Alright, so I'm going to score and slip the bottom. That's all I need is your approval. That's what I'm here for. That's fine. You're here for your approval. Alright, so I'm going to score the bottom. I don't use a serrated rib on the bottom because I don't want to go too far in and have things that I have to reach for to blend. I'm already going to have to reach to blend the bottom with my modeling tool. So just scoring all the way around. You really want to make sure you score and slip the seam and this portion really well. Every year we get a few like mugs, and I'm looking forward to seeing them come out of the kiln, and after the bisque firing, either the bottom came off because they didn't score and slip, or the seam cracks. That's quick. So put a fair amount of slip on there. So now I'm going to compress that on as even and level as I can. So I want to make sure that I'm not too far off one side or another, or the other. It's equal. Push it over. Just make sure that the seam is lined up. Then I'm going to use my smooth rib and blend up. The first time around is just rough work, just trying to blend lightly. The second time around is more for vanity, just make it look nice. So the first time I'm really just carrying clay over that seam, making sure I seal it really well. And then the second time around, really cleaning it up, making it look nice. I can clean some of this on the wheel as well. So the one thing I was talking about a minute ago is some of my students will take the needle tool underneath and they cut it diagonal. And then there's nothing to blend upward. So be careful, make sure that it's nice and even on the walls. Even if you go a little outside, that's fine, it gives you something to blend. So you don't have to do this, I could just pull this straight out. I know it's easy enough to get out, but it's just a little tip for some of you who will have it drying on there a little too long. Kind of tear the towel a little bit. If you don't have the paper towel in there, I guarantee you're not getting this thing out without cutting your cylinder, okay? So, have to have the paper towel, then you just pull it straight out. Okay? Ooh, like magic. And then I take the paper towel, throw that away. Please don't stick it in the sponge bucket. That's for some reason everybody's favorite spot to put it. Grab a modeling tool real quick. Alright, so blending the inside. The outside's already blended, but I need to blend the inside, so I shouldn't be able to see. This is the first thing I look for when I'm grading these, is I look for the seam, and if I can't see where the seam is, you get those 10 points, exactly, that 10%. So I'm just going to take my modeling tool. I kind of go across it first. And then after that, I'll just kind of blend upwards. And I also look at the very, very bottom and just try to blend it. Some of them will be really smooth on their own, just if you had your seam lined up and you cut your slab really clean. This one's fairly clean. I got one side that sticks out. I'm just going to blend at the very bottom. Okay? So the seam's all blended. We've got our cylinder. Now it's time to take it to the wheel, and we're going to basically change the shape. And you can add things, whatever features you'd like to get creative with it. And then the handle I'll show you after probably 2 or 3 days. And I'll show everybody, and it'll be a hot mess over at the sink for quite a while. Okay? It's called the pull handle. So go ahead and stop that for me, Marcy.